Yeah, here we go, and live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Ward Radio live stream. Are you ready to rumble? Okay, I'm not going to do it, but it was a tenet of the 90s that everybody did. I'm your host, I'm your host, Cardinellis. The studio is in Los Angeles, and it is full of a superstar cast today. It is, I'm joined by Kwaku L, as well as Brad Whitbeck, Don Bradley, and Sean Bailey. Hold your books up, guys. Hold your books up. We got some heavy hitters here. Don Bradley wrote the lost 116 pages, reconstructing many of the stories and narratives of the lost 116 pages of the manuscript that was really 300 pages of fool's cap. We also have The Chronological Signs of the Second Coming of Jesus Christ by Sean Bailey and Dragon Thief by Brad Whitbeck. Kwaku.
A fictional book.
We're the odd men out, bro.
I
We
don't
don't got
have a
no
book.
books.
I'm going to write a book.
You're going to write a book? What's it going to be on?
It's going to be about how to ruin the lives of your enemies.
I like it already.
Bill
You know?
Real.
According to the teachings of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
That's a
In
really
a
good
Christ-like
title.
way,
How to
in a good way.
ruin the lives of your enemies according to the teachings.
Well,
of
we're
Jesus.
gonna destroy him with facts and knowledge here, and the principal curator of said facts and knowledge is going to be Don Bradley here, who has so graciously offered to have an Ask Me Anything with questions regarding Joseph Smith. All right, so we're gonna start out just letting you know, keep it PC, no crazy, no swearing, no nothing like that. Any questions you guys have, send us a super chat. We will gladly ask them. We'll start out with a couple of our own and let you know that we've been recording some really interesting new podcasts on the data. You know what I'm saying? The data surrounding Joseph Smith, and some really interesting new information that's never been talked about before that's coming up about, what was it, Don? The origins of Nauvoo polygamy? Tell me. Okay, sick. So anyway, Don, really fast, just give us the Reader's Digest version of who you are, what's your story, and then we can just dive right in. We'll get started. And everybody, if you got any burning questions about Joseph Smith, if you have any challenges to Don Bradley or about Joseph Smith, if you're an anti-Mormon hater, now's your chance to get your 15 minutes of fame and try and stump him. Just send us a super chat. We'll read it. Also, if you have any questions, members in our chat, we'll try and grab yours as well. But yeah, super chats are always the best. Let us know. Don Bradley, go.
So I'm Don Bradley. At the age of about 17, I started doing Latter-day Saint history, archival research, particularly at the LDS Church Archives. I have never stopped. And I've become essentially, I like to call sort of a Joseph Smithologist, right? This is the main thing I have focused on in my life's work. I've spent tens of thousands of hours studying Joseph Smith in detail. I've created detailed timelines of different portions of his life to understand the events, look at the patterns of his behavior and what do those reveal about the man and what he was doing. And in the process of my research, much earlier in my life, I ended up finding things that troubled me, and I left the church. I stopped believing. I left the church officially for 5 years, had my name removed from the church records, and then in part as a result of, initiated actually very much by further research and things that I was finding that were much more positive about the history of the church, I came back. I was rebaptized, and like I said, I've written a book on what we can know about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon and what was in the lost 116 pages. I've written on Joseph Smith and polygamy. I was the primary researcher for the Joseph Smith polygamy series that Brian Hales did. It stacks about this high, maybe. Massive set of books, cites some 1,500 sources. I collected most of those sources for him. I've written on the First Vision, the Kinderhook plates, all kinds of things. I sort of do all things Joseph Smith.
Okay,
Awesome.
so many people say you are the premier scholar in Mormonism right now. And by premier, I mean the best looking. Okay, and that's at this point self-evident and irrefutable. So we got our first super chat here right now. Stephen Diamond, thank you very much for the super chat, says, are you coming with your books to the Priesthood Restoration site? Can't wait to see you here. Don, have you been to the site yet? Love you all. He has temple rocks. Like, I guess they were part of the foundation of the temple. Wants to show them off, wants us to be able to see them. We,
Really?
as soon as we have a chance, we will be
Foundation of
I
which
would be
temple?
fascinated, yeah.
Which temple?
You know what? Steve Diamond, remind me, he sent us an email once with pictures. He's got what is it, Stephen?
If he's, so he was mentioning the Priesthood Restoration site. There is a claimed site for an early Latter-day Saint temple in Harmony, Pennsylvania. They're like the ruins of a building. And some of the local lore, at least, was that was the earliest attempt at a Latter-day Saint temple. It's not clear that is what it is. It's something I would like to explore further.
Okay, cool. So he's in Philadelphia. Is this ringing a bell?
So that would be, he's in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
So this, if they really built a temple there, which seems doubtful, but if they did, it would have been in 1828, like while they were working, or 29, while they were translating the Book of Mormon. So anyway, like, wow.
Okay, so we got a question for you here. What's the best evidence that you see of Joseph Smith being a prophet, for and against that claim?
Best evidence for and against?
Yeah, the claim of Joseph Smith being a prophet.
Okay.
In all of your studies.
Right. So this is a question that...
By the way, this person's not a member and didn't pay for a super chat, but they did
fine.
say something funny, that you're the Elvis of church history. This dude is amazing. So big fan. I don't know how I feel about calling you the Elvis of church history, but we've come up with some really good alliterations lately. What were they? He was the prodigal professor of polygamy.
Yeah.
Then he was also the likable librarian of liturgy. And then, what was another one?
No, librarian of the lost 116 pages.
Oh, yeah, the likable librarian of lost 16 pages. And then,
Don Corleone.
Don Corleone.
Yeah,
Bradley.
Don Corleone Bradley.
I have many names.
Okay, cool. So anyway, biggest evidence for and against Joseph Smith being a prophet, go.
Okay. So this is an interesting question, and it straddles a line, right? So mostly what I present on and so on is actually the history of Joseph Smith, right? And so this question gets to, so as a historian, it's really straightforward. I mean, it's difficult, but it's still straightforward to assess someone's motives. But when you start like arguing, so I have plenty of evidence for Joseph Smith's religious sincerity. I would put that forward as actually one of the better evidences that he was a prophet, with the understanding that he could have still been sincere and yet not been a prophet, right?
Okay, fair.
So some of the evidence for his sincerity, we're actually doing an episode on the origin of Nauvoo polygamy, or have done one, and that actually will lay out some of what I see as some of the best evidence of Joseph Smith's sincerity. That even it actually becomes clear when we look at the patterns of Joseph Smith's behavior in polygamy, more of what his motives were and weren't. And that pattern helps show that he was religiously sincere. He was doing this for religious reasons, even though people tend to assume very much that he was not. I mean, as far as best evidence is that he was not a prophet, I mean, I suppose someone could point to, like, in the case of the Book of Abraham, kind of the disjunction between what's on the papyri that we have, at least, from Kirtland, and then what Joseph Smith translates. That wouldn't call into question his sincerity, but someone could use that to say, hey, maybe he wasn't really a prophet. I mean, my sort of gut reaction to that is that Joseph Smith, the idea behind that is, if Joseph Smith were a true prophet of God, he should be able to translate Egyptian funerary texts accurately. Well, a prophet is actually someone who speaks for God. It's not someone who translates Egyptian funerary texts, right? Because if it were, then anybody who has sufficient knowledge of Egyptology would be a prophet, right? So the question is, what would God have wanted the Latter-day Saints to have? I think it makes much more sense he would want them to have the Book of Abraham than that he would want them to have a correct text of the Book of Breathings.
That's actually a really good point. That's a really good point.
So, thank you. I think that the greatest evidence for Joseph Smith being a prophet is actually in the teachings. And I see things that he said about the first vision, things that are in the Book of Mormon, that show such depths of understanding of divine grace, of the condescension of God, with Jesus being, as the Book of Mormon title page says, the eternal God, like coming down to our level to lift us up. That's really, I mean, there are historical evidences for Joseph Smith's sincerity, and then there are evidences, for him actually having been a prophet. And I see the power of the teachings and how they work in the lives of millions of Latter-day Saints, including myself, as the greatest evidence for him actually being a prophet.
Okay,
Wow.
you know
Like
what?
that.
In the absence of Brittany here, you got to be the keeper of the super chats, my man. Brad, can you read the first of the 3 super chats we got?
Yeah,
Questions for
from
Don Bradley.
Luke Hansen, we've got a question about Joseph Smith and the Second Coming.
Oh.
The temple in Far West for sure needs to be built before the millennium, right? Like it's going to get announced in General Conference someday?
You want to go first?
I mean, yeah, this may be more in your bailiwick, but
In
I mean,
your
yes.
what?
Bailiwick.
In your
That is
bailiwick?
the first time I've heard that casually used in my life.
What?
I have
And
read
Your
that word,
Very
wheelhouse.
apropos.
but never heard
Okay,
it.
dude, Kwaku, what's a bailiwick, bro?
I wasn't born in 1750. I don't know what the hell
Yeah,
you're talking about.
dude,
Bailiwick?
okay. I was the translator between Radio Free Mormon during our debate and like all these Gen Z kids, Brad and Kwaku. He was making jokes like, oh, I know what I feel like. I'm like in a movie. It's called 3 Men and a Baby, you know? And then
Never
all
heard
of
of
the
that
old
movie.
boomers were like, and all the young kids that we brought along were like, what? And I was like,
Right.
no, it's a jokes guy. Burt Reynolds was in a movie called 3 Men and a Baby. They were raising a small baby. It was actually funny comedy. Solid reference, buddy. A little bit dated, but solid. You know, I was like trying to be this bridge.
You're the Zennial. You're the Zennial.
I'm the Zennial bridging that gap. I cannot bridge the gap between the medieval times from which you said, this is your bailiwick. What is that, Gaelic?
Is that what people yelled before they burned a witch?
No, here's
Bailiwick.
what I know is a bailiwick. It's because of my daughters. This is the like the butler on Sophia the First. It was like a Disney kid princess show.
Sophia the First. By the
Exactly.
way, it's a chick in our ward that is the voice that sings Sophia the First. Yeah,
In
there's
fact,
a bunch
there's-
of voice actors, and yeah, so every parent out there that walks around thinking Sophia the First. I'm finding out what being
Yeah.
royal's all
Yeah.
about.
So bailiwick
Yeah,
is
that's,
like a domain.
that's a Mormon.
Right. So
Okay.
it's not it's like an old fashioned word. It's like it's a sophisticated word. So
Wow. Okay.
We just got called crass.
But you know
I'm
what?
Googling what this is.
It's
Based.
maybe like jurisdiction, right? Like
Okay.
okay.
Okay, well,
All right.
super chat. Keeper of the super chats. Let's hit him.
Well, he wanted me to answer that question, right?
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
get it from Sean as well.
So my understanding is that the Far West Temple does not need to be rebuilt before the Second Coming. The temples that do need to be built are the temples in Jerusalem and in the land of Zion, or the New Jerusalem. However, if my understanding of that is correct, the New Jerusalem is going to be absolutely massive at some point, and maybe Far West, maybe even Adam-on-Diamond as far away as 70 miles. That might all be one giant metropolis. Who knows?
And we had an interesting. Oh, sorry. Say what you want to say quick, and then I'm actually tossing to our bicker tonight, buddy, who's sitting in the corner
Be
here.
careful how you spell bailiwick and don't use 2 names because it is an adult film star. So be very careful with your Google search history.
well, like I was saying,
I know this
that's
guy
better.
studies polygamy, but now I got more questions.
That's funny. All right. Well, you said something really interesting, Brad, in your conversation with our buddy Joshua Gailey, who is the son of one of the apostles of the, or one of the 70s of the Bickertonite sect of the Restoration Succession Crisis, and so on and so forth. I'm botching the name. It's the Church of Jesus Christ with the one in Christ, just to show off, just to flex, you know. So anyway, what was so interesting is regurgitate what was happening when he talked about the temple lot, Sean. Do you remember? Is there a mic? Is that microphone next to you, Josh?
He has it. Turn it on. I got it.
You have it? Okay. So hold on. I'm going to try and regurgitate that conversation that you guys created before you said that like it's a zoo over at the temple lot. Okay. They can see you on the studio cam. Give us your observation of what it's like over the temple lot, what you noticed, and then Brad, do you remember what you said to him after having been to Jerusalem?
yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So Josh, tell us what you noticed about the temple lot.
Hi, everybody. I'm hiding in the corner, enjoying the conversation. And so, one thing, I've had the privilege to be at like Temple Square a couple times in Independence for some of the Book of Mormon symposiums that they have out there. And my observation is it's kind of comical, okay, where you have these massive temples all surrounding this singular tiny piece of grass. and we don't have any property out there. So for us, it's just kind of because for me, wherever we build the New Jerusalem, I just want to be there, right? Like so
Sure.
for us,
When we're millionaires, we're going to buy you guys one. We're going to donate, dog. You can join the frenzy, bro.
put us right in the middle. There's an empty spot of grass available, is what I've heard. So, but it was just kind of comical because you have these huge, and it's almost like everybody's lining up. Like I want to be the first one into the concert. That's my joke. Like everybody wants to be the first one in.
And what was awesome about that is as he was describing how all of these different restoration groups are like, this is my spot, this is my spot, this is my spot, I was realizing, having just gone to Jerusalem, that's exactly what Jerusalem is like.
Yeah, that's not a
yeah.
bug. That's a feature
Yeah.
of the New Jerusalem.
Like that is the New
You know?
Jerusalem now, because you have the Muslims there. This is our spot. The Jews, this is our spot. The Armenians, this is our spot. Like Ottomans, this is our spot. Right, all over the
Yeah.
place. It was fascinating.
So yeah, the New Jerusalem will hopefully be just as chaotic and cool as the Old Jerusalem, but just with hopefully wider.
Do you know what happened?
No, I said chaotic as in like good chaos, comfortable chaos. I'm not talking about like Hezbollah launching rockets,
I was like,
you know, and then the church funding the new
Can't wait for
Iron
the
Dome.
IDF to be there.
Yeah,
you know, like,
There's going to be John DeLynn and RFM continuing the anti-Mormon
Oh,
mobster
wow.
tradition. They launched mortars at Nauvoo. What people don't realize is the mob actually,
Not
besides
them specifically, but
no, not John DeLynn and RFM. No, they would prefer their violence in the 21st century. But no, I'm just kidding. I know they're your buddies. I don't want to offend them. So anyway, yeah, like in when was the Battle of Nauvoo that people don't even realize because it doesn't make it in the history books, but it's called the Battle of Nauvoo. The mob had mortars. They were shelling Nauvoo. Like, how crazy is that? They were shelling Nauvoo. It was just
wild.
indiscriminate shelling. So when people say like, oh, well, why wasn't Joseph Smith more clear of? Well, maybe because the Mormons were running from mortar fire.
And this was
You know?
pre-Civil War. This was like early mortars, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. So anyway, okay, cool.
'Kay,
So that's
now
your
we got some
question
more-
about the temple.
yeah. Now we got some more
I'm shutting off
questions.
your mic.
Next one up, we've got this one's a little bit funnier, and it probably is going to be a little bit faster. Who would win in an arm wrestle, Joseph Smith or Abinadi?
Oh,
so you know, as tough as Abinadi might be portrayed
With that old man strength, right?
the wiry arms. Joseph Smith was very famously strong. He had the childhood leg surgery that made it difficult for him to walk properly, but it's been suggested that he may have deliberately compensated for that by strengthening his upper body because
Oh.
he was known to be able to really out-wrestle others. And
so he skipped
my
leg
my
day.
money would go on Joseph Smith. What?
He skipped leg day.
Yeah, he might have, yeah.
A lot of the later paintings of him, it shows like he's got a big belly and his legs are really skinny. But
Yeah.
also realize they showed everybody like that. That was
Oh.
kind of
Yeah.
like that weird Victorian
It was like
There's
the
a South.
Penguin in the first Batman by
Yeah.
Tim Burton, you know? Okay.
Yeah, and now we got another. Next up, we've got this from 1 Thessalonians 5:21.
Wait, before you read it, I want
Yeah.
to just address something on the last super chat before we move on.
Oh yeah.
It, I've referenced this before, but what's the Hall of Fame that Joseph Smith was in? He was like in the North American Wrestling Hall of Fame, or like he's in some
Really?
Hall of Fame of wrestling. What is it?
Is it for stick pulling?
Well, yeah, because I remember that one of my MTC teachers was a big time wrestler and had gone into like some professional circuits and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, did you know that Joseph Smith is in the blankety blankety blank Hall of Fame? It's just like tennis. I don't know what the tennis Hall of Fame is. I know where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is, and I know where the Baseball Hall of Fame is because it's by where my cousin lives in Cooperstown, New York, right? But
Carden, speaking of sports,
yeah, well,
minus Brittany Griner, Sue Bird, name one WNBA player.
oh, well, they can't dunk, so I don't watch. It's not a real sport. It's kind of like golf.
Oh,
you
my
know,
gosh.
where they call it a sport so they can sell tickets and stuff like that. But we all know they're just having fun and dinking around.
So,
So
it's-
no,
I've been asking people to name one WNBA player. Nobody knows any.
I don't know.
well, that's
don't
just
know
because
any.
you're misogynist.
No.
So, to answer that question,
I've never
Carden?
given a massage in my life.
Joseph Smith actually took state in wrestling in 1822.
And
Really?
Yeah.
No.
So he's gonna have.
Oh, I was like, wow, there was okay. What
Like, he had
states
time?
was it?
Also, he was a kid.
I don't think
Yeah.
he ever he was in high school, right?
Next
Yeah.
one we got.
'Kay.
What do you think about the South Park episode regarding Martin and Lucy Harris, where it portrays the lost 116 pages?
Dumb.
That actually jived with me, and I've always thought the lost 116 pages story sounded lame.
Okay. So when we look, so my book on the lost 116 pages, the second part is about what we can know about what was in the pages. The first part is what we can know about the history of the pages, like the translation and then the theft. So I have compiled 40 some odd sources about the theft itself.
Maybe a
right?
few
So-
more than South Park used.
Yeah.
Yeah,
as
certainly.
far as I know, I've got all the currently available sources. And one of the things that I did is I arranged them chronologically. So what are the earliest mentions of the theft of those pages, and what do they say about that? And then what are the latest mentions? And so one of the things I was looking for was, how does people's understanding of what happened to the lost pages develop, right? And here's what I found. The idea that Lucy Harris burned the pages, right, that she stole them and burned them, first appears in print in the 1850s.
Oh,
This is
after Joseph
like
Smith's death, even.
like a quarter of a century after the
the
theft.
event, yeah.
And when it first appears, the author of the non-Mormon book who mentioned it was saying that it was supposed that Lucy Harris had taken the manuscript and that she had hidden it or given it to someone else or burned it. So it was clear they didn't know what had happened to it, because they suggested multiple things that could have happened, this or that or that, right? The next book, the next source going chronologically that I can find on the theft actually is paraphrasing that earlier source. The first one, I can't remember if it's Orsimus Turner. I think it might have been. But anyway, the next person is saying, well, Lucy Harris could have taken the manuscript and hidden it, or she could have burned it. She probably did the latter. So now they're using the first guy, what the first guy said, but they're giving their own opinion. Well, it was probably that she burned it. And then the next person, around 1860, paraphrases this again and says she burned it. They leave out the fact that we don't know what happened to it. And they said, she burned it. And so basically what I found is that the further you get from the actual manuscript theft, the more likely people are to say Lucy Harris took the manuscript and burned it. Now, as a historian, that's not what I want to see. I want to see what's the story that people are tying closer to the event when people actually knew what they were talking about. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
So Lucy Harris dies in 1836. So she dies like 15 years or so before the story comes out that she burned the manuscript.
Huh.
So they're not getting that from her 15 years after she's dead, right? So what we do know, I've got a source that I cite in the book, the Journal of William Wallace White, where he says that, BA name, right? Like,
Yeah.
William Wallace.
Totally.
William
BA.
Wallace
Totally,
White.
totally.
I'm not understanding the acronym. What's BA? Is that bailiwick available? What is that? No, I'm just kidding.
Bailiwick
Go on.
Archaic.
Yeah, bailiwick archaic.
So, where was I?
Oh,
Help me
gee.
out.
You were talking to William Wallace White.
Yeah,
Yeah,
William
yes,
Wallace White.
William
Yeah,
Wallace
yeah.
White. This guy kept a journal, and he hears Martin Harris Jr. speak, Martin Harris's son. And Martin Harris Jr. says, my dad told me over and over about the theft of the lost pages. And when he did, he said that initially he wondered if his wife may have taken the pages and hidden them or given them to somebody else. He didn't think she'd burned them. But he thought she might have taken them. But then on her deathbed, when they were estranged in 1836, she dies at the age of 40. On her deathbed, she denied knowing what had happened to the pages. So she's saying she didn't do it. And she was a devout Quaker, and in Quakerism, they're not supposed to lie. Right? That's one
Especially
of the big,
on their deathbed, right?
That's one of the big premises of their religion. And at that time, in particular, it was taken as very serious. What you said on your deathbed was admissible as evidence in court because it was assumed that when people were about to meet God, they weren't going to lie. So is this devout Quaker on her deathbed lying as she's going to go meet God, or did she not take that manuscript?
Yeah.
So Martin Harris, even though they were estranged, he had a high enough of opinion of his wife's spirituality and honesty that he came to believe that it must not have been her. And so
So
I
do
think
we know
that's-
who it was? Do we have any clues at all?
Well, we do. I mean, the Harrises had a son-in-law who was a swindler,
Okay.
who may have been
Yeah.
involved in that. And then the treasure digging, Joseph Smith's former treasure digging companions had tried to steal the plates themselves. Why not try to steal the manuscript and so on? There are other possibilities.
Yeah.
Also,
And we've actually got an episode where we go more in depth on
Yeah,
this.
we do.
Yeah, that we just recorded.
So you got another super chat, bro? Hit
Yeah.
the next super chat.
So
Hit him,
this one-
brother.
This one I think can be really fast. Besides Martin Harris, is there any documents related to the other witnesses' testimony of the angel Moroni and the golden plates throughout their lives?
so I assume that it means testimonies that he gave, not in their published testimony, the 8 witnesses and 3
Yeah,
witnesses, but
yeah.
statements that they made. David Whitmer is the one who gave the most interviews, actually. He gave quite a few. Oliver Cowdery died before people had really tried to start recording. It wasn't until, like, really mostly around the 1870s that people in the church started to realize, the original witnesses of what was happening in the Restoration are dying off. We need to start gathering up what they said, their memories. And so David Whitmer gives a bunch of interviews. Martin Harris gives several. John Whitmer lives long enough to do a detailed interview in which he says that Joseph handed the plates into his hands uncovered, and that he
Whoa,
analyzed,
cool.
analyzed them.
Dude.
So
Okay, so are you getting a call? You said you're getting a call from a boy, Jacob Isbell, Kwaku?
Oh yeah.
He wants to ask a question.
Oh, and then,
Ask him if he can send in a super chat. We're going to try and burn through these super chats really fast.
then we've got an interesting
Okay,
one here.
and we got an interesting one right here. I'll gladly take a question from Jacob Isbell, especially if he wants to call. You're going to have to put it on the mic and make sure he's not like swearing or cursing at Dawn, because Jake. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay.
Um.
I'll give him a ring back.
Okay.
Okay. What's the super chat? Hit it, bro.
So the next one up. Do you feel psychedelics were involved in the first vision, Kirtland dedication, and School of the Prophets? If so, how does that impact your testimony? Thanks.
So who is this?
This is Mormons, Mystics, and Muons.
Oh, okay. I think
Nuance.
I've seen. That's like a podcast?
Yeah, these are guys who
something?
think there's something to do with psychedelics.
So I can tell you that there is a lot of work being done on this by different scholars, and like obviously to most Latter-day Saints this is going to sound like like Joseph Smith was visited by aliens and like the ancient aliens things, right, when they say
Yeah.
these
Got a
kinds
problem
of
with
things.
that or something?
What?
Got a problem with that, huh?
So, but there are serious scholars working on it, and so, and part of the reason why people are working on this right now is actually because there's a lot of research that's going on like the benefits of psychedelics,
And
right?
like their
For,
uses with depression and
their
things like
uses
that.
for depression, for anxiety, for addiction,
Yeah.
for
PTSD.
PTSD,
Yeah.
and they're showing very positive results. And so that's kind of where that idea is coming
Now,
from.
I just want to know, you were gone out of the church for a long time while you're doing most of your research. What research did you do that involves psychedelics? And what can you report about those psychedelics?
So I did.
I'm
yes,
holding
so-
it.
so I was-
I'm holding the
I
face.
was out of the church for several years. I did experience psychedelics.
Oh. Wow.
He answered.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I had profound, beautiful experiences of love. So
I wanted
Wow.
to learn more about
Yeah.
Joseph Smith and psychedelics, so I decided to try some when I was going to sleep, and I woke up on Jupiter talking to a cat. So it was a totally different. No, they didn't have that.
Wow, that's. Hey, I got to tell you, I think that there's very interesting developments that are getting made into psilocybin, especially as you say, in conjunction with treatments for mental illness that I think actually do look very promising, and to me that will be a scientific advancement in humanity when it does happen. So, okay, our boy Jacob Isbell's here. What's going on, Jacob?
Oh, it's good to hear you. I gotta say, I get saddened when I see how short Brad's beard has become.
I
And
know.
every time I see your face, I feel bad. I really do feel bad for being rude to you. Like the first time we were on a conversation. together.
Oh, it's
And
fine.
then you guys talk about wrestling. I'm like, dude, when I was a missionary, I wrestled a Mongolian wrestler who was like a competitive wrestler back in Mongolia. He wouldn't go out on splits with me until I beat him at wrestling like 3 times in a
wow.
row.
What?
And then he's like, "Oh, okay,
dang.
this short dude. I guess I'll follow him for a little bit."
Okay,
yeah.
so Mormonism's
I'm gonna
own.
take some pointers from Joseph Smith.
Okay, so what's your question, bro?
Okay, I'm just thinking about Joseph Smith, where there was the promise. Oh, Moroni told him from the get-go, your name's going to be had for good and evil among all nations. And I'm thinking of the promise in section 122 of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
Speaking to Joseph Smith, your people will never be turned from you by the testimony of traitors. So,
Ooh.
Don Bradley, I'd love your opinion whether you could, when people are relying upon details from the Nauvoo Expositor and the accusers in the Nauvoo Expositor, do you consider those credible accusations against Joseph Smith, or is that part of the testimony of traitors talked about in Doctrine and Covenants section 122?
So, interesting, right?
Thank
So-
you, Jacob Isbell.
Yeah.
So you've got a framing, right, added to the question. So first, there's the question itself, and then there's a frame that's added to the question as part of a persuasive appeal, right? So this is a, this is a strong-
exact same thing, my
so this is a very intelligent way to do a persuasive appeal, but it also allows someone to set a framing for something that may not be the best framing on it. So, for instance, when we do scientific research, right, we are just trying to figure out what happened in what happens in nature, right, what the laws of nature are. Presumably, hopefully, we're not trying to do like an Islamic science or a Jewish science or, if you will, a Christian science, right? We're just trying to do science, right? So the purpose of doing history foundationally is to know what happened in the past. And then there may be other uses of history where we try to figure out what happened in the past mean for us, right? So the question about the Nauvoo Expositor with regard to the testimonies given there about how Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, how Joseph Smith gave D&C 132 the revelation on polygamy, and so on. The proper question to bring to that is, what happened? And so when we're not trying to show that something in particular happened, but we just want to know what happened, we go through our sources in a different way than if we're trying to disprove our sources. So the framing that's been laid out here is intended to discredit the sources before we've even looked at the sources. That's not a good way to figure out anything, much less what happened with Joseph Smith's polygamy. So
Okay,
that's all I'm
so do you believe the traitors or not? Come on, answer this question,
and
Doug.
how often do you beat your wife?
No, no, we're not talking about beating wives. We're talking about beating traitors.
So,
like, no, I'm just
so
kidding.
in my experience, back when I was out of the church, and I thought for several years that Joseph Smith was an opportunist,
Yeah.
I encountered a historical source that seemed to me, even though I was coming from outside of the Restoration, it seemed to me that this historical source was too negative. So it was actually this guy whose father had been the Whitmer family's pastor before they were Latter-day Saints. And he was portraying the Whitmers as having been very superstitious. They believed in magic, they believed in witches, and so on, according to him. And he said, well, let me tell you this other thing. When Joseph Smith came up from Pennsylvania to stay with the Whitmers while he was translating the Book of Mormon, he said that the angel came to him again after he arrived there, that the angel appeared again, and that because this was the 12th time that the angel appeared, this meant this was a sign that Joseph was supposed to stay there until the translation was complete. And I thought, no, he's just using this to show that the Whitmers are gullible. And then I discovered that right about the time, so first you have to realize the angel did appear when they arrived at the Whitmer house. We know this from the Whitmers. They say the angel appeared to Mary Whitmer, the mother. So then...
You're pulling a Mitch McConnell right
Am I?
now. You're just
That's
rebooting.
what I'm doing.
You're just rebooting.
So when Mary Whitmer sees the angel, I realized that this is actually when Joseph Smith is translating 1 Nephi 1, where he talks about, Lehi talks about seeing someone who's shining like the sun descend, followed by 12 others. And then they receive a revelation around this time, D&C 18, saying they're supposed to call 12 disciples in the new church, 12 apostles. And so the number 12 was popping up all over the place at this time in Joseph's Revelations, and I realized this source that was critical of the restoration that I had dismissed, even though I didn't believe in the restoration. I thought Joseph Smith was an opportunist. This source that I had dismissed actually really had something to it. And so I have a great respect for the historical sources. We can't divide the historical sources up into, defenders and critics or whatever. They all are seeing something from their angle, even if they have a bias like this guy did. They can be reporting actual facts.
Okay, so keeper of the super chats, Brad Whitbeck. Read us the next one. By the way, there's a lot of new people here in the chat. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out. If you've just tuned in, we are interviewing Don Bradley here, probably the premier historian on Joseph Smith at this point. And he just wrote a book. Hold it up one more time. I'm going to ask you to do this 2 or 3 times. He just wrote The Lost 116 Pages, where he basically recovers and reanalyzes much of the content that we were able to glean from firsthand sources of what was actually in those lost 116 pages. I myself can testify that I have not devoured a book about church history as voraciously as his since, honestly, Rough Stone Rolling by Richard Bushman. And he is a font of knowledge that seems to never run out. And you can ask us anything during this live stream. If you have any burning questions, send us a super chat. We're going to read it live on air. Don's going to be able to answer the whole 9 yards. Get to the next one. Brad.
Okay, next up, we've got, has Hugh Nibley benefited your personal research into church history, the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham?
Sure. So one thing, when I was growing up, Hugh Nibley, of course, was really set up as a sort of role model within the church, someone who obviously did deep research, and through that research was able to contribute to the church, contribute to our understanding of the scriptures. I found that as a kid inspiring. There was a time when my mom went to some event and unexpectedly Hugh Nibley showed up and spoke to them. And she said that she went up to him afterward and said, well, I've got a son who loves to study into, the church. And she said, what would you tell him? And he just kind of said, well, keep going, right? So that was cool. And Nibley's stuff where he sees temple connections to the endowment all over the place is definitely valuable, and his emphasis on Zion is fantastic.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, dude. Yeah. So you're a Nibley stan.
Yeah.
I still can't believe he never went to the old world.
He didn't?
No, he never. I was reading a biography somewhere and it said, despite never having gone to the old world. I was like, bro, you're a BYU professor that's like the most beloved dude of the 60s. The church will put you on a plane. Like, what the heck, man? Yeah. Never having visited the old world. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so
apparently he would read books during sacrament meeting and not listen to the speakers.
No, supposedly he would do this while he was teaching Sunday school. He would just start suddenly reading something out loud to the class that he wanted to read.
Oh, wow.
That's fun.
Savage.
When I was a teenager, I called him up. I looked in the phone book and I got his number. And I had questions about the Book of Mormon, and the only one I remember was about the name.
Wait, hold on. You just cold called with
Hugh
his
Nibley?
number in the phone book, Hugh Nibley?
I was an
How old were you?
unusual 17, 18-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that weird that phone books were a thing? That
Yes.
there was a book everybody got with your info on it without your... Isn't that weird?
Uh-huh.
Isn't that weird how we did
I
that?
mean,
Society was beautiful back then, though, bro. You don't remember life before the internet.
So I called
do.
him up. I actually called
Yeah.
him. I asked, is Hugh there? And he said, this is him. And my dad was listening, and my dad told me afterward, you don't call Hugh Nibley just Hugh. It should have been Brother Nibley, right? But this shows
Or
how
Professor or whatever, right?
unself-conscious I was about
Yeah.
this. So
Wow.
what my question that I remember for him was about the name Angola in the Book of Mormon, because it's the name of a modern African country.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to know, I was already weighing questions about the Book of Mormon, and I thought, could Joseph Smith have gotten this from the name of the modern country? So I asked him if Angola, I said, is Angola an ancient name? And he said, well, it has an ancient sound to it. And then I asked him if the modern country of Angola had been there in the past, and he said, no, it was a recent thing.
Oh, really?
Okay.
That was my
Cool.
Oh, that's cool.
conversation with Hugh Nibley when I was a
Hey,
kid.
when I was
Nice.
13, I asked an apostle a question at a stake conference, not really
Did
realizing
it
the
have to do with
gravity of.
necking?
No. Actually, it was worse than that. I actually had to do with
Petting.
heavy petting.
Ah.
But no, I'm just kidding. Isn't that the worst, the worst euphemism ever to show up in For Strength of Youth?
I still
No.
don't know what it means.
Yeah, it's like
I-
meow. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It's like woof woof. But here's my question. All right, look at that scowl from Quaco. So my question was actually for James E. Faust. I was 13 years old, and I remember I had to borrow a shirt from my dad, and it was really baggy on me, and it was salmon pinstripe. Looked like pink pinstripe, but I'm not masculine enough to admit to having worn pink to that to that state conference. But what happened was it was an area or a state conference in which he was able to show up. The area authority had invited him, and so it was packed. And I realized, like, oh, an apostle is kind of like a big deal, but I mean, the stake center, and it's a massive Southern California stake center, was all the way to the back. We had to sit on the stage after a full-length Olympic basketball court and a full-length chapel. It was a full house, right? And I remember that James E. Faust got up, gave some short words. The stake president gave some short words, and it was good. And finally said, we finished early, and Elder Faust here has agreed to do a Q&A, right? So I was like,
And
oh,
ask
okay.
me anything.
Yeah, kind of like an Ask Me Anything. And so I was like, oh, well, that's cool. So some guys got up, and I remember one bishop asking about whether or not, you can wear a bra in or outside of the garments, and all these just benign, stupid, banal questions were like, what's the average color of Post-it notes? It was just like not anything interesting. And I had a question because I'd been studying in junior high there. So I walk up, I waited in line, and they gave me a little microphone like you do a testimony after like 2 or 3 other questions. And I said, so I've been doing a lot of reading lately. I really like studying like where things started and how they started. And I've been studying actually just the world. And I can't get an idea of like what we really believe, because Brigham Young said that God works by natural laws. And I've read quotes that God, we accept all truth no matter from where it comes. And I can't get a straight answer on evolution. Like, do we believe in the theory of evolution and like the Big Bang and stuff like that? Or do we not? I'm getting mixed signals here. And I read 2 quotes that were fresh on my memory, right? And so I basically said, point blank, so do we believe in evolution or not? And dude, all of a sudden it gets super quiet. And everybody goes from looking at me to just like looking at him, right? And I remember feeling like really uneasy at how quiet it got all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? I just remember that, like, I will never forget that, right? And then he stops and he's like twisting his finger around for a while, and he says, you know what? He says, there's a lot of argument that's been put into this question, and honestly, the church accepts all truth from wherever it comes, and we really have no official stance on this. And he gave kind of a solid, regular, what I see as now a predictable answer that was good, you know what I'm saying? But, dude, I remember I'm sitting there, I still had the mic in my hand, I was like, okay, I'm 13, I didn't know what to do with it, right? Immediately, the stake president gets up. He's like, well, this was a great meeting. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're just going to end this Ask Me Anything, or end this, Q&A, and Sister So-and-so is going to conduct the closing prayer. And then so I was still there during the song because I still had the mic, right? And as soon as the song ended, I just remember like 5 or 6 dudes coming up to me, giving me their cards, like, hi, I'm a professor at Stanford, and here, let me tell you the truth of all things. And then other dudes are like, oh, no, let me tell you, I got like 7 cards from like JPL scientists and like Rockwell Labs. One of the dudes was a Black Ops guys for Raytheon, you know what I'm saying? So I have all these like freaking nuclear scientists trying to tell me whether we believe in evolution or not. It was pretty funny. So I can empathize and commiserate with your non-self-awareness while addressing church leaders in your youth.
That's
I
good.
have a story like that. Can I share real quick?
Yeah, bust it.
So I was when we were in grad school. I was in the ward of Dallin Oaks Jr. He and his family were in that ward, and one of their kids, Jacob Oaks, was getting married, and we go to their reception. It's up in Provo Canyon, right? And I'm in the buffet line for the reception, and I turn around, and right next to me is President Oaks. And I ask him,
Cool.
I decide I'm going to ask him in that moment the question that has been on my mind, okay? I asked him, what do you think of the brownies? And he's like, they look great.
Lame, but awesome.
Wait, so this is
Okay.
Dallin D. Oaks, right?
Dallin Oaks Jr. So I don't know what his middle
Dallin
initial
D.
is.
Because he was my stake president as
Really?
well. And do I have a great story? I'll make it quick.
Your court of love must have been wild.
This is how I started throwing parties. Our bishop noticed that we had a lot of inactive people, and so he said, how do we get them to come? And I said, well, Bishop, you have a huge house. I'm going to make a little flyer for award activity and send it to the prettiest girls in the stake. And I know if they come, everyone else will come. It turned out it was the first counselor's house, and hundreds of people showed up. It was ended up not like a award activity at all. Then I get called into his office, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh, crap, I done pissed off Daddy Oaks.
Yeah.
So I get in there, and he's a serious guy. He just, so I hear you threw a party, and I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I heard it was a success. Many people had a great time. And I'm like, oh, yeah. He's like, you've been called to be first counselor in the elders' quorum. Whoa! Oh, man, I was very afraid something bad was about to happen. You're freaking me out, dude.
That's awesome.
It's funny.
That's
All
awesome.
right.
Okay,
Well,
we've
shout out to all the members here. Thanks for hitting us up with your questions. Hit the super chat.
We got 7 more in
Oh.
the chamber, so we got to go
Let's
fast.
burn through 'em, burn through 'em.
So we got Don. Are there any similarities between Joseph Smith and other historical figures in Scripture, or not in Scripture if you want, that most people don't know about that you think are interesting?
Yeah, very much, very much. It's a great question. So, let's take as a for instance, in the first vision, in one of the accounts of the first vision, Joseph Smith talks about how because of the glory of God around him, the trees appeared to be on fire. And yet they weren't consumed. So this is like Moses and the burning bush, right? He talks about how when the light descends upon him, then he's able to see the Father and the Son, right? And so there's an idea that he has to be transfigured. Well, in the book of Moses, you have, the Moses 1, it says Moses has the glory of God come upon him and it transfigures him, and then he's able to be in the presence of God, right? So there are parallels with Moses. There are parallels with lots of biblical figures. One of the more fascinating might be Solomon, right? So, if I ask, actually I already gave it away. I shouldn't have said the name. So, if I say, a young man sees God, and he can ask God anything he wants, and what he asks him for is wisdom, right? And then he's blessed with wisdom and so on, right? Like he goes on to have a religious career, which is actually ultimately controversial, right? He builds temples, but then he takes many wives
Marries
and so
a
on,
lot
right?
Hundreds.
of women.
So Solomon, I could be describing in what I just said. I could be describing Joseph Smith, or I could be describing Solomon. Solomon, when he's a young man, he sees God in a dream, and God says, ask me anything you want, and he asks for wisdom, and God says, because you've asked me for wisdom and not these other things, I'm going to give you all these other things too.
So he was justified by God in all his proclivities with women. Awesome. Next question.
Wasn't
I'm
he-
just kidding.
If any of you
a
lack
fallen
wisdom,
prophet?
I was talking about Solomon.
I know.
No, Solomon was not fallen the entire time. It's similar to David's situation. But next up we got
Next super chat. Yeah,
Chris
keep it going.
Hoskin. Antis claim that Joseph Smith didn't have kids with plural wives because John Bennett was giving tons of abortions. Does that claim hold water time frame wise?
So this claim does not hold water for multiple reasons. So we do know that John C. Bennett was investigated in May of 1842. He was removed from the church, excommunicated, right? The women who were involved with what they called the spiritual wifery system in Nauvoo, which was somewhat like a sort of spiritual free love, what we when that was investigated, the women who were involved gave their testimonies, and at least one of the women said that John C. Bennett told her that if he got her pregnant, or if one of the guys who was doing this with him, some young men from the University of Nauvoo that he was teaching spiritual wifery to, if they got her pregnant, then John C. Bennett could perform an abortion. So we know that Bennett was, at least theoretically, using abortions to cover his own tracks.
Call it the
right?
big A word so YouTube doesn't
So-
flag us.
Oh.
Huh?
So the algorithms don't flag us. Say the big A
Instead
word.
of saying the word, say just big
The
A.
big A word.
Yeah, the big
Yeah.
A word. There we are.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to remember now where I was.
So we have a
John
record
C. Bennett.
showing that John C. Bennett was maybe using it for himself.
Yeah, right. Okay, yes. So the question is, was Joseph Smith doing this? So since we have accounts from many of... So think about it this way. We have accounts from the women that John C. Bennett and his sort of comrades in spiritual wifery, what they were saying to the women that they were sleeping with. We also have accounts, though, from the women that Joseph Smith proposed to, and several of them say that he taught them that polygamy was about raising up seed, right? It was about there being children, right, who were born into these marriages. And so if Joseph Smith had sold the polygamy to these women in that way, sold it, so to speak, then he would have been undermining his own approach to them by then having them abort. You know, it's like, well, what is this polygamy about? It's about producing children. And then when a child is conceived, oh, well, then he insists that they abort the children. That would have been a good way of shooting himself in the foot. We also see that Joseph Smith, early in Nauvoo, he's marrying women who are very pregnant, actually. And so it appears that he actually wants there to be children born into these marriages, not that he's trying to destroy children. from
And
these
they were
marriages.
previously pregnant, not pregnant by him.
Right.
So yeah,
Yes.
okay. Let's move on from this one, just because I don't want to get my live stream flagged, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
some
yeah.
dangerous territory.
Not
because of the Gnostic information, but just because of the big A word. Hit the next super chat.
First off, we got Green Flash. Welcome.
Oh, got a new member. Woo!
Yeah.
Green Flash. Here, let's give him a buzz. Wait. Yeah, Green Flash. What up? Okay, cool. That's
Nice.
that's his cool little sound effect. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Let's do this one. So, what was life like for the Saints and Joseph in Kirtland versus Nauvoo versus Far West? And we should maybe truncate this one a little so we can get to the rest. How many members would have had ready access to the Book of Mormon?
Oh, at those different places?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were asking Ohio, Nauvoo, and Far West?
Kirtland, Nauvoo, and
Kirtland.
Far West.
Okay. So I know less about Far West. Mormon history becomes much less interesting to me after June 27th, 1844. So the day Joseph Smith dies. So in terms of Kirtland versus Nauvoo, I mean, one big difference is that in Kirtland, you have with the dedication of the temple, you have it's a very, very spiritually charged atmosphere. They're really in terms of like their experience of spiritual gifts, and that's a big focus. In Nauvoo, that becomes less of a focus. They are really doing a lot more to try to physically build up Nauvoo, and they become much more prosperous in Nauvoo than they had been in Kirtland by far. And so those are some real differences in their lives. Now, the Book of Mormon, 5,000 copies were printed in 1830, so they had a good number to start out with. In 1837, they printed some more, and in 1840, they printed even more. And so presumably they don't start printing them in 37 in Kirtland until they're starting to run out. So that does suggest that there's kind of a bottleneck in Kirtland where it would have been more difficult to get your hands on a copy of the Book of Mormon.
Okay, next one. By the way, for everybody watching, please tell your friends. This is a very rare opportunity. We have the numero uno mind on Joseph Smith wedged in between Joshua Bailey, author of the Chronicles of the Second Coming, and Brad Whitbeck, author of The Dragon Thief. Okay, and we got
As
a
if
chance
that
to
means anything.
ask us. Well, you're an author. That's cool. You can ask us anything, and make sure you smash that like button. It tells all the algorithms to tell your buddy that we got this going on. We're in our last 15 minutes here, so get any super chats you have out of your system if you want Don Bradley to answer your question. Hit it.
Okay, Midnight Saint. It says, Paul, brother, want to interview you, Don. Why do you think the other pages are sealed? Do you think they will be unsealed over time or at all? Love you, Don.
Oh, cool. Thanks. So why do I think that the sealed portion, as we call it, is sealed? So a theme, an under-recognized... How many questions do we have left?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5.
Okay. So an under-recognized theme of the Restoration is what I would which I would call esoteric, the esoteric. Okay. So the idea of the esoteric is that there are higher truths that people only are given when they're ready for them or when it's the right time, right? That they're not just given out indiscriminately. That's a theme that runs all the way through the Restoration. So one thing I like to bring up on that is, when Joseph Smith comes out of the sacred grove, the first person he encounters after his first vision is his mother. Joseph's exhausted from his dramatic spiritual experience. He goes and he leans up against the fireplace. His mother asks him, "What is the matter?" And he answers and says, he did not know but had come to inquire. So you've just seen God, and all you have to say to your mom is, your church is wrong, right? So
you said he did not know he came to inquire. Previously, you
I
said...
I got that totally wrong.
Yeah,
I was
you said...
combining that with a quote from the Lapham interview on the Lost Pages.
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
totally
that's right.
right.
So he
Thank you
said-
for
Take
that.
two.
So, yes, what he said... what he said is...
For I know that Presbyterianism
right.
is true, right?
I've learned for myself that Presbyterianism is not true.
Poor Presbyterians. I like those guys.
Yeah.
No, anyway, keep going.
So Joseph, he's keeping the first vision secret at first. He actually does the same thing with Moroni until the angel appears again and tells him, go tell your father about all of this. And so in the Book of Mormon, the brother of Jared is shown, in Ether 3, it says he's shown a vision of everything from the beginning of the world to the end. And that knowledge is so sacred and comprehensive that he's supposed to hold it back until people's faith has been tested by other information, which is the Book of Mormon that we have. And so the idea there is that once we fully learn to understand and apply what we have in the Book of Mormon, then this vision that was sealed up in the sealed plates would be made available to us.
Okay, rock on.
Nice.
Next one, my man.
Next one up. This one's kind of a fun one. So, Danny Gray says, Don, what info do you have on Joseph Smith being involved in the invention and popularity of baseball?
If you build it, they will come, baby.
Don't hold out on me. I know it's real.
Is that a thing?
He knows it's real.
This guy, Danny Gray, knows it's real, I guess. What do you got on this?
We know Joseph Smith loved to play games.
Uh-huh.
And we know that he loved to wrestle and so on, right? So maybe, and we know that they were skipping stones on the river while they were translating. Martin Harris
Really?
tells us this.
That's
Oh,
cool.
Yeah, they would take breaks from translating and go skip stones. So, maybe it even goes back into the Book of Mormon,
That's what the
maybe
Kurulams and Kumams are.
Kurulams and Kumams,
It's the baseball bat and glove, dude.
the sort of Laban, they hand that down. Maybe they're using it as a bat. The Liahona, it explicitly says, is a ball. It calls it
Right.
a ball. You can't make this up. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, there you
come
go.
on. Parallels.
So, yeah.
Parallels right there.
Okay, next one, brother.
Okay,
That's
next
good.
one up. We got that First Thessalonians said thank you for answering their questions so nicely.
Oh, sure.
And let me
Chris.
see.
I think Chris is next. How many documented sources are there of Joseph Smith visited by Jesus Christ?
Ooh.
So that's a really interesting question.
Are they
because-
talking about like first vision or like?
Well, that's interesting.
This
Because
selfie, he was
I
looking for Joseph Smith's selfie with Jesus. You know, keep going.
So, I mean, if we're talking about the first vision, then I mean there are several, like 4 accounts Joseph himself is directly involved in, but then there are like I know of maybe like 4 other accounts or something. I think there are somewhere around 8 or more, maybe 9. I don't know. Other accounts of the first vision. But there are also a number of accounts of visions of Christ in Kirtland in particular. Well, the 1832 History of the Church recounts the first vision, but it also says Martin Harris saw Jesus and Oliver Cowdery saw Jesus, which most people don't know. But in Kirtland, there were a host of appearances of Christ, and Carl Ricks Anderson has a book. I'm not thinking of the name, but if you were to look on Amazon for Carl Ricks Anderson, Carl with a K,
Okay.
books about like Christ in Kirtland, I think it might be called.
Is
He
it
has
Joseph
a-
both
Smith's
with K's
Kirtland?
also?
Is
What?
it Joseph Smith's Kirtland? Is that what it's
No,
called?
no,
Is
this
it-
one is like Christ in Kirtland.
Christ spelled with a K as well.
No.
Okay.
I'm looking up Carl Ricks Anderson. He's born 1937. Wow. Okay. You pull up these authors from any time and anywhere. Yeah, it looks like he's got a Wikipedia article and a couple of books written here. Kirtland Today: History with the Future, and I don't know. I'll find it.
Sure, okay.
And you keep talking.
Okay, next one up. This one is just directly as it is written from Snagret. And Snagret says, how full of crap is Michelle Stone about Joseph Smith not being a polygamist?
We don't say full of crap, Snagrid.
So that's a loaded
We
question.
just say, what's a challenge? She's thinking out loud. I like Michelle. There's nothing wrong with thinking out loud and developing your testimony with a microphone.
So I've only watched a little bit. I have watched a little bit of what she has broadcast.
Yeah.
I actually think that when Latter-day Saints have questions about their faith, things in the history, I think that's totally fine. I think that they should explore those questions. She seems from her podcast like a very nice person. She did actually find a talk of mine and kind of ridicule it in a way that didn't tell any of it. Gave my punchy, provocative ending, but not any of the arguments or the question I was trying to answer. But I wasn't offended by that, right? So what I'm saying is, on a personal level, I don't have any problem with her, right? As far as like what I see with people who are arguing that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy, that they most often come at it from an angle where, like I was talking about framing earlier in response to the earlier question, sometimes there's another author on this subject, Whitney Horning, who at the beginning of her book, arguing that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy, she says up front in the book that she has just decided that she's going to believe the public denials of Joseph Smith's polygamy and then build her case from there. And so that's an acknowledgement that when we do that, we're acknowledging, I don't want to know what actually happened. I want to think what I think happened already. And that's not a good way of finding what actually happened in the past. I can understand Michelle Stone and others being uncomfortable with Joseph Smith practicing polygamy for a lot of reasons. And in particular, I can understand that people have this fear that if Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, that's the way we're going to have to live in the next life. And most normal people today, right, like with our values, like don't want to practice polygamy, right? This isn't how we want to spend our eternity. So I can certainly understand the discomfort.
Or
But
maybe
when
even
they
in the
are
millennium, right?
When they are setting out to make a case for something instead of going to the historical sources and saying what actually happened, then that's not a way to find out truth. It's simply not. So whether I'm comfortable with polygamy or someone else is, Joseph Smith practicing it, has nothing to do with whether he did it. So there are actually about 30 sources saying that Joseph Smith practiced and taught polygamy from within his lifetime. So you have this claim, right, that polygamy is made up later, sort of retrojected onto Joseph Smith. This is decidedly not the case, and perhaps we can have another conversation where we talk
Yeah,
through
sure.
some of those sources.
All right, thanks. Now, for all those of you guys that are just tuning in, if you we're coming close to the end here, so if you got any last super chats, get them out of your system. Also, if you haven't liked this live stream, please like it. It tells everybody else that they got 10 more minutes left before we shut this baby down and we stop letting them ask questions. So hit these last 4 or 5 super chats, Brad.
Okay, so next up, no questions for y'all. Love the laughter and all the insights y'all bring.
From who?
Kwaku is the bomb from Green Flash, who just joined.
Nice.
Quaku, Green Flash.
And then we have a.
I was gonna say, why does Quaku get all the compliments, man? Jeez, man. Nobody else-
Hey, look, they're all for Don Bradley.
Yeah, for real. And then Cougar Tail has put in an interesting one, and this one's for Sean.
Oh,
Is there any significance to the 2024 eclipse crossing over America and its crossing over the New Jerusalem location? Is this a sign?
yes.
Ooh, 2024 eclipse.
Actually, I really love the idea that we have 2 eclipses so close together. They cross right in Missouri. Like, as soon as I learned that, it was one of the first things that I looked at. Where is it crossing?
And signs in the heavens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Signs in the heavens. So I was thinking, okay, if this crosses over Independence, Missouri, I'm moving. I'm totally moving.
yeah, it's like I'm buying a ranch in Adirondack,
I'm
baby.
buying a ranch, right? It actually crosses near the Illinois border on the other side of Missouri, but it's still Missouri. So I'm like, all right, you know what? It's cool. It's cool, but I don't know if it's like a definitive sign that this is the time, right? But definitely there are signs in the heavens. There are signs on earth. And as we see more and more of these things, I think it's just a sign for us that we need to be watching and be ready.
Okay,
Nice.
good. I like it. Keeper of the chats. Keep going.
Alrighty.
Oh, and by the way, while you're looking up that last chat, I found the name of the book you were looking for, Don. It's called Joseph Smith's Kirtland Eyewitness Accounts.
It is Joseph
By
Smith Kirtland.
Carl
it's,
Ricks
it's
Anderson.
actually not that one. But
Well,
that's okay.
Wikipedia said so you're wrong, and
He has a
Wikipedia is
newer
right.
one.
Wikipedia doesn't lie.
Well,
Ever.
It might be
actually,
Visions of Christ in Kirtland. It's something like that.
So I have a copy of that book,
Oh.
and it actually has dozens of different appearances of Christ and Heavenly Father in Kirtland. Now, he probably had a revised version of that, but in the forward of that book, it says that he was collecting all of this research about appearances of Christ and Heavenly Father in Kirtland, and he shared the research with Neal A. Maxwell. And Neal A. Maxwell told him, you need to write a book about this. And so it sounds like he wrote more than one, which is
Wow.
awesome.
Okay, well, let's get these super chats. There's a really good one that just came up. I can't wait to get to it.
I know, but
The-
I'm going
the
to
Keith
interrupt
S.
it because
one.
I have a personal question I want to ask after
hit.
this one.
Hit.
So, have you guys, this is from Minor Prophet Ian Malcolm, have you guys heard the Kirtland Temple purchase rumor? Apparently, it may have actually happened this time. And the rest of the buzz in the chat is something about the financials of the Community of Christ in this year.
Oh,
I haven't heard of that one yet.
I hadn't heard
I'd
a rumor that
seen
it has
buzz.
happened. I had not heard that. No.
Yeah.
We were literally just talking about this yesterday.
Yeah,
I wonder when
exactly.
they're selling the
Right.
Kirtland Temple.
Yeah.
So the reason that
The buyouts are starting, Joshua
buy-
Gailey. The buyouts are starting, bro.
I'm for sale.
You're it's like I'm for sale. That's funny. All right.
Okay, this one, what do you think? What do you think of Joseph's understanding of, or Joseph's use of Elias as a title? What are your thoughts on that?
For whom?
For Don.
Oh.
So certainly that, I mean, it's fascinating. I think that I understand where he's getting that, right? So if you look in Malachi, you have the idea that you have a prophecy at the end of Malachi, of course, that Elijah will return and turn the hearts of the children to the fathers and the hearts of the fathers to the children. And that most obviously one might think would refer to an actual literal return of Elijah, since it names him specifically. And this is like what of course happens in the Kirtland Temple
Yeah.
in 1836. But in the New Testament, Elijah, they say that the prophecy of Elijah is fulfilled. Jesus says that it's fulfilled by John the Baptist. And the Greek version of the name Elijah that's given in the New Testament there is Elias. And so I think Joseph is seeing that there's an idea of a literal return of Elijah, but then that also takes the form of, there's also like a figurative return or spiritual return of Elijah in the form of this Elias. And so he makes the reasonable surmise from this that, like, Ananias is like a certain sort of figure that there can be more than one of.
And what's your your identification of the Elias and DNC 110 and the rationale of that?
Oh, okay. Well, I am fascinated with the idea. I mean, Joseph Smith's sermons and revelations give different identifications of Elias. And in one of his revelations, it says that it refers to John the Beloved, John the Revelator, and it says, this, if you will, is Elias.
Section 77.
And so that is the one that seems most interesting to me in the context of the Kirtland Temple. Joseph had earlier been visited by John the Baptist. For him to later be visited by John the Beloved is interesting because those two are paired in fascinating ways in the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's an open question, but that's what I lean toward.
Okay, we got some other great super chats coming in. Hit these questions,
okay.
man. By
This
the way,
one.
75 likes with as many people we got in the chat right now. Please hit that like button. If you haven't hit it yet, hit it.
Okay, next up from Keith S. Thoughts on the recent Joseph Smith daguerreotype? Yeah.
Fascinating question. Okay, so I initially looked at it and thought to myself, no. I thought, I especially thought the eyes were too small. They were like too narrow. And then I started doing more exploration on this. I encountered my friend Curtis Weber shared some forensic analysis that he had done. And I was looking at the Nauvoo painting, portrait painting that Cardin is going to be putting up. And I noticed that if you look at the size of the eyes and the sort of glisten of the skin and so on in the Nauvoo painting, I realized, that's not what a real person looks like. That this person has like childlike skin or angelic skin, like overly large eyes, and so on. And so I thought, well, maybe I've been comparing this daguerreotype to a painting that is not a realistic depiction of a person. Then, with Curtis Weber's analysis, I became convinced that it was Joseph Smith, and that I can actually discern that if you look at the eyes and you look up close and you look at the eye that looks smaller than the other eye, that is the eye that has the greatest gleam from the lights. And so, in other words, you can tell that he's squinting. And so once we realize that he's squinting, that explains why the eyes look so small, although piercing, right? And then I've done further work on the history of the daguerreotype that I hope to publish in the form of a paper.
Wow. Well, then you got to come here and talk to us about it. I got dibs on Don Bradley.
I think I can explain why the Joseph Smith III family would have hidden the daguerreotype.
You got to tell us, man. Why?
No.
Oh, you're teasing it?
No.
You're teasing it? I know what hotel room you're in tonight. No, I'm just kidding. All right, next super chat, my man. Hit it. If you haven't had a chance to smash the like button, hit it as well.
Alrighty. Daniel Stark. To what degree do you think the Kirtland Safety Society was Joseph's or the other church leaders' fault?
Okay, that is a very
loaded question.
A complex question, because part of what that really gets into is the ins and outs of Kirtland finances, the legalities of things,
macroeconomics,
and so on.
Yeah.
I think definitely Joseph Smith plays a role in the failure of the Kirtland Safety Society. They really did not know. They were not economists. They were not bankers. They really did not know what they were doing. However, if you look at, they happened to start a bank just within a few months of the largest bank collapse in American history the Panic of 1837. And so mostly what happened wasn't necessarily the fault of anyone in particular. It was really, really, really terrible timing.
Yeah, the economy.
Oh, that was our end bell, but we got a couple more that we're finishing. We're in overtime now.
So
We're in overtime.
There's one from Polynikes that doesn't say anything, and I've been looking to see if they commented somewhere else and then added the super chat to like bump it, but I haven't seen their question. So if they had a question that they wanted to ask, Polynikes, go ahead and type it in again, and we'll see if we can.
Yeah. You got about
Have that
30
pop up.
seconds here. Meanwhile, I'll just start engaging in the outro. Again, make sure if you have a chance, you can check us out on wardradio.com. You can follow all of us on our respective Instagram and Twitter profiles, whether it's Kwaku L, Brad Wetbeck, Sean Bailey.
The close one.
What? I said Brad Whitbeck, right?
It was close enough. Yeah.
Oh, was I like reading something on the screen and I slurred my speech? And said,
That's one name you got to get exactly right.
Slur is the right way to have described your speech. Yeah, that's.
Oh, what did I say?
No.
Don't worry about it.
Did I call you Batty
It was
Whitbeck or
clearly.
something?
It
was
was
an
just
E
a
instead of an I.
thing that you would call an immigrant like me, just from the other border. Maybe if you were not a great person.
Oh, I don't even know what happened there. Sorry, I was reading so much and I'm trying to get everything done and do an outro simultaneously. That's funny. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So check them out, whether it's Braderico, Kwaku L, or Don. How can people kind of just follow your stuff? They can buy your book, but what else you got? How else can they follow you before we read this last question?
I have a page on academia.edu, which is very easy to sign up for, right? And you just log in and you can probably see the stuff without logging in, actually. If you go on academia.edu, you look up Don Bradley, you will find most of the things that I publish, not all, most of the things I published are there and you can read them. And as I publish more things than I'm able, I'll put them up.
Okay,
Cool.
Here's the last super chat, and that's our outro, my man. Brad, can you leave the last super chat?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got from Zachary Thornton. Don, Emma disliked Brigham Young. Was Joseph displeased with her attitude towards Brigham?
Oh, okay. That is a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And I am not sure how much we have in the way of evidence to bear on that question. One thing that you have with the dynamic between Emma and well, let me put it this way. I actually would imagine that whether or not Joseph was displeased with Emma's attitude toward Brigham, I think he probably would have been displeased with Brigham's attitude toward Emma because Joseph was actually, he could really be into like defending his family, right? And so Brigham did not have a high opinion of Emma, but they really saw very different angles on Joseph. Obviously, you know, Emma sees Joseph primarily in the context of him being a husband and father. Brigham experiences him in the context of the priesthood quorums. He looks up to him, is loyal to him as an authority. And so they experience such different aspects of the man that I think it's really not surprising that they would view Joseph very differently and they would view each other across the chasm of all these disagreements.
All right, cool. So we got the Emma v. Brigham Young, and it's going to be awesome.
And we find the last super chat.
Oh, there's, one last super chat.
Yeah, from Polynikes. They got theirs in. And this one is directed to Kwaku.
Oh.
What would it take to send Kwaku on a special assignment service mission to the Whatever podcast?
Oh, what's the Whatever podcast?
Wait, did he need somebody assassinate? What are they talking about?
They want you to go on the Whatever podcast.
Oh, dude, I would do that. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get him on there.
Who's the Whatever?
The Whatever podcast.
It's ringing a bell.
Have you seen the ones where it's like...
The blue-haired guy?
Oh, no, whatever. He's the guy that has all the silly feminists and OnlyFans girls on making a fool of themselves and then says all the masculinity verse stuff.
That is definitely one way to describe it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool,
yeah, I'd
cool,
go
yeah.
Yeah, dude, it would be fun to have you on that podcast.
How come you get invited to all the fun stuff? I want to go on there. I'm the only one that married a smoking hot wife in this room besides Brad. Oh, wait, so did Sean. He's married. You know what I'm saying?
My wife's a babe.
Super smoking hot.
Yeah, you go, brother.
Well, maybe that's why I would be on, because I just have too many women to choose from.
It's
I'm
like
kidding.
taking advice
I've
from
got
a
one.
blind-
I've got one beautiful girlfriend. She's watching, and then she's had a panic attack. So
That's funny. That's funny.
Interesting.
All right, awesome. Then,
yeah, that's exactly
thanks
what
so
she
much. So it says, excellent. Thanks, Brad Whippock. Also tell Cardinal to stop ghosting Aaron Cromer's text messages. I don't know what that is, but excellent question.
If we get
to-
200 likes quick, it goes
to-
on that whatever podcast.
Yeah, that was
Earlier on, there was,
got 200
there
likes. Okay,
was
cool,
one
awesome.
from-
I'm just making sure that we got everything. You know what I'm saying? Anyway,
Penny in Atlanta.
yeah,
Shout out
thanks
to
so much
Penny.
for hanging out with us, guys. Put up your books here. We got Sean Bailey, who wrote the chronological history of the Second Coming, or the chronological signs of the Second Coming. All right, you can check it out. He also has a really cool podcast. The podcast is super cool. You also got Don Bradley writing The Lost 116 Pages, available wherever fine books are sold. And if you like fiction, read it. It's cool. The Dragon Thief by Blake and Raven Penn. Now, you can look that up. It's not exactly the same as Bailiwick. You know what I'm saying? as Kwaku noticed before, but it's a super cool book that tells the story of I forgot the guy's name, but it's got dragons and it's cool.
Yeah.
So
basically,
anyway.
if you guys like Brandon Sanderson books
This
or
is better.
Aragon, you're
This is
gonna like-
better.
Oh yeah, have you been listening?
Oh,
you
it's
think
awesome.
it's better? Oh, sick.
Absolutely.
Aragon.
And-
I remember that movie with the Avril Lavigne song.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
This is called Historical Evidence for the Resurrection and the Book of Mormon. It's written by Josh Gailey, our Bickertonite friend. I'm kidding.
Nah.
Over here, and basically, you just kind of realize that the resurrection and the restoration kind of have very similar.
Yeah,
there's
it's pretty cool.
things
Similar
Either way,
evidences,
on the way
yeah.
out, please make sure that you like this. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please subscribe. Thank you. This has been a totally awesome podcast. It's been real and it's been fun and it's been real fun. So let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Please, por favor. And if you have time, check us out at Ward Radio.